they are desperate to get me out. But I said, the public got to know they're not really coming for me. They're coming for them, and I'm just in the way. The last thing that, before I was cancelled, the BBC said to me is, why are you sacrificing your career on the hill of vaccine harms? And I said, because that's the hill you're killing my people on. The Great Reset, Agenda 2030, is such a threat to the quality of life to most people on this planet. We're going to have to stand up, and we're going to have to fight for our rights, otherwise humanity's going down, and there's nowhere to run. It's happening all over the globe at the same time.
Andrew, thank you for inviting us here to Westminster. We're in your office. We'll talk about your office move during the course of today's interview. There's quite a few things we want to cover today. You've just come from a session talking about the WHO. Maybe we'll start there. What's been the latest conversation in Parliament today about the treaty and the amendments?
Madam Deputy Speaker, repeatedly during this questioning session, the Minister has stated that we don't really know what shape the pandemic agreement or the accord or treaty is going to take. Madam Deputy Speaker, under Article 55, paragraph 2 of the WHO, the World Health Organisation's own charter, it states that all member states must have a full draft of the amendments to treaties to be voted on 4 months in advance. Given that despite the fact that the WHO are breaking their own rules, they are insisting on moving forward with the votes in Geneva on the 27th of May on the pandemic treaty and the amendments to the international health regulations. Will the Minister join me and many others in calling for a deferment of those votes until this House and others around the world have had a chance to examine these very important details?
No.
Well, Danny Kruger, the MP for Devizes, had secured an urgent question. That's not volunteered by the government. It's the Speaker accepting there is the need for a question to be answered, and it forces a government minister to come to the dispatch box, and all questions will be taken from both sides of the House. I think there's a number of take-home issues, is that the number of Conservative MPs now concerned about the pandemic treaty, accord or agreement, whichever one they're using at the moment, and the amendments to the international health regulations is growing, the number of Conservative MPs concerned. Very telling that there wasn't one Labour MP, backbench Labour MP, in for that urgent question, which I've very rarely seen that, which says to me that despite the reassurances of the Minister that we're not going to give up sovereignty, that they know that Labour is going to be the next government, and Labour are going to sell the people out to the WHO. They're very, very keen. My question to the Minister was quite near the end of the session. There were probably about total of no more than 20 questions across the chamber, 10 on each side. And my question was that I, first of all, congratulated the Honourable Member for Devizes, Danny Kruger, for securing the urgent question, and it was very timely. My question was that we'd seen during this urgent question the answers from the Minister repeatedly. He'd stated that we have no idea. We can't really comment on the treaty because we have no idea. It's an evolving document. It's not been agreed, so we don't know what the final draft's going to look like. Under Article 55, paragraph 2 of the WHO's World Health Organisation's own charter, it states that all amendments for voting and the treaty amendments have to be handed over or laid before every one of the 194 member states' parliaments 4 months in advance of the vote. Given that the World Health Organisation have not complied with their own rules, they're still intent on voting on the instruments on the 27th of May. Will the Minister join me and many others in calling for the vote on the 27th at the World Health Assembly to be delayed so that member states can have, Parliament can have proper scrutiny of these very important amendments? His answer was no. So they're quite happy for the WHO to break their own rules, and we would consider giving the powers that they're seeking to an organisation that's quite happy to break their own rules. It's bizarre. And however many reassurances the Minister makes that we're not going to be handing over sovereignty and power, I mean, most members of Parliament will never read the amendments or the treaty clauses, and they're horrifying. The fact that we're actually negotiating and we're still in the room when these things are on the table is deeply worrying. And clearly, we're not going, the parliamentarians, let alone the public, we're not going to see the final draft until it's agreed. So what do we know the government's signing up to? By that time, they'll have already agreed to it. Public will have no say whatsoever. And when I've been around the world, different parts of Europe, speaking about the dangers of the WHO instruments and their power grab, places like Latvia or Denmark or Sweden, Norway, certainly in Latvia, their parliamentarians have never seen a draft of the treaty and the amendments for consideration in their own language. They should be laid in the native language so that the public, they don't have to know English to be able to see what their elected politicians are signing them up to. Not everyone does. I mean, the lack of transparency is absolutely shocking. Of an organisation which is completely corrupted with money from private donors such as and interest groups like Bill Gates and, of course, the Chinese Communist Party.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole negotiation, we call it negotiation, it have been shrouded in secrecy. It's not like we're signing a mobile phone contract here. This is a major international treaty.
And their own rules. Every member state's government should have at least 4 months' notice of the amendments that are being considered, and we're not getting any. We're not going to get 1 day's notice. The shape of things to come. Well, any politician who even contemplates handing over these powers to this unelected, unaccountable, non-tax-paying, diplomatically immune from prosecution organisation, I mean, quite honestly, doesn't deserve a seat in any elected assembly, and it's a huge betrayal of whoever the people who put them there. I hope they've been paid well, because now that they've sold their souls, I can promise you they'll never be able to buy them back.
Mm. What's interesting about what you've said today, and it's not the first time we've heard this, it's essentially become a one-sided political debate. Why do you think there's such an absence from the opposition?
They don't want to talk. There's many things that Parliament doesn't want to talk about, and clearly Labour are keeping their powder dry. I've tried to explain to people that given the fact that the Uniparty exists, they've got to look at probably all the elections, but certainly the next election. It's not a race between the blue and the red horse to see who gets to the finish line. It's more of a relay race between the blue team and the red team, and it's a baton handover. Well, they're leaving the Conservative government now, are laying everything in position for the Labour government to pick up, and they don't want to commit themselves, so they're just not going to turn up to an urgent question. Another thing that's going on very clearly is that the Conservative government's participation in parts of PESCO and the procurement thereof and of sharing of defence services provision, which is very dangerous, with the European Union, is that the Labour Party have already announced that they are going into a defence pact with the European Union. There is only one pact on offer, which they can't level with the British people. That is the European Defence and Security Union. That would give, and will give, the European Union and its head, which is currently Ursula von der Leyen, full control of our Army, Navy, Air Force, MI5, MI6, GCHQ, and our police force. And we're supposed to have left the European Union. This is the final betrayal. And Labour have already announced they're going to have this defence pact with the European Union. That is what's going to happen. And if you think we've ever left the European Union, we would possibly sign up to anything like that. But that's what they intend to do. And also, with the end of the UK defence industry, because the European Union are going to go for single-point procurement for everything. And I'll have bet for you, not many of the providers will be in the United Kingdom.
What do you think with that in mind, what do you think some of the ultimate consequences are in the climate of increasing geopolitical conflict? What are the risks there?
Well, none of that adds up, does it? Because at the same time as the government are telling us we may have to contemplate conscription, and bear in mind that France and Germany now have already passed all the legislation for conscription. They haven't enacted it, but they've enabled it. They can enact it, and the European Union are basically issuing war bonds now to investors to invest in the war with Russia. And of course, once they've sold the bonds, I mean, they owe the investors a war, don't they? I mean, this is the madhouse that we're in. At the same time as all of this, the UK government have, just for appeasing the green agenda, so-called green agenda, we're just shutting the last steelworks in UK that can make weapons-grade steel. At the same time as we've been told there's going to definitely be a war. Well, I mean, this is policies of madness. At the same time as we're stopping farmers growing food.
It is a bit...
Whose side do you think they are really on?
Well, it's certainly
not the British people's.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. None of it makes sense.
Do you think, I mean, where do you think this is all heading? Do you think there's talk of a peaceful revolution? Do you think there's going to be... Is there a political pathway out of this, or do the public need to take matters into their own hands? Is there a need for some form of peaceful revolution to tackle these issues? Because every day there's a new issue. You know, the pandemic was driven by profits. This defence situation is driven by profits, and all of it is serving...
Well, it's not just this country. I mean, the Parliament's democracy has been captured and usurped by huge corporate interests. We've got corporations now in the world that are more powerful than countries. That should never have been allowed to happen. I'm thinking about BlackRock, Vanguard. Their lobbying power, it's appalling. And they're not going to give up their power easily or lightly. And, you know, whether I'm arguing about the WHO or vaccine harms and excess deaths in the chamber of the House of Commons, I mean, it's so out of touch, or whether we should be negotiating with Russia to bring the Ukraine conflict to an end. The House of Commons is just totally out of touch with public opinion as far as I'm concerned. I'm absolutely... There's no logic to it. You'd have thought they wanted to connect with the public, since we are going to be having a general election in the relatively near future. But there's no sign of that. But then this current system of democracy, the illusion of choice, which doesn't really exist, and you know, when all the horses in the race are owned by the same owners, they don't mind who wins, and that's really where we are. So people have got to vote for independence, I think, because the party system is completely corrupted. I mean, you know, when I was thrown out of the Conservatives for speaking out over the vaccines, you know, I had 4 members of staff, 2 full-time men and 2 part-time ladies. That was what the ladies wanted to do. The 2 men had been with me, well, one of them had been with me for 17 years. And he said he was going to stay with the Conservatives. And I said, well, why would you do that? You know, you've seen all the evidence. You know, everything I'm saying about the vaccines is 100% true. And he said, yeah. I said, you've been with me for 17 years, you know. When we exposed the post office scandal and the modern slavery in Leicester in the garment industry, and what an absolute fraud HS2 was, and it was always going to get... We've did all that. He said, yes, I know you're right, he said, but I've also seen what the party's done to you financially and reputationally, and I just don't want it being done to me. Because he said, I've got a wife and children too. So I said, well, so what you mean is you want me to go over the top to protect your wife and children because you're not big enough man to do it. He never answered that, and we never spoke ever again.
I think that's kind of such a sad story, but it's kind of reflective of society at the moment. There's almost the problems have become so pervasive, and the machine that defends against those established needs is so aggressive towards people. You know, everyone is smeared and vilified for raising their head above the parapet. People's livelihoods are under threat.
And then they try and bankrupt you. Yeah. Well, I mean, they did warn me when before I was expelled from the Conservative Party. The last warning was a meeting with a grandee who was clearly speaking for the party. I expressed for an hour and a half all my concerns around the pandemic response, the vaccines' safety, lack of safety and efficacy, and my deep concerns over involuntary euthanasia of vulnerable elderly through midazolam and morphine. And at the end of that, he just turned around to me and said, Andrew, there is currently this is in January 23, Andrew, there's currently no political appetite for your views on the vaccines. There may well be in 20 years' time, and you're probably going to be proven right then. But in the meantime, you need to bear in mind that you're taking on the most powerful vested interest in the world with all the personal risk for you, which that will entail. And lots of strange things. I mean, I probably haven't had a claim on car insurance in 30 years. I've got a certificate with 12 years no claims bonus, the most anyone can have in the UK. And I can't get car insurance. They will not quote me. For some reason. My current wife, is divorcing me. I went to 6 legal firms because I believe it's because I'm taking Hancock to court, through the courts. No one wants to act for me. That's local firms in northwest Leicestershire and some in London.
And yet you continue.
Well, to be honest, we're so far down the track. I'm on my 3rd Parliamentary standards investigation in 12 months.
Not making it easy for you then?
No, I think I've had about 4 weeks in the last 18 months where I haven't been on the standards investigation. They are desperate to get me out. But I said, the public got to know they're not really coming for me. They're coming for them, and I'm just in the way.
The problem with all
where we are now.
Absolutely. The problem with all this is it sends a message to your neighbours.
Yeah, keep your head down.
Keep your head down.
Yeah, and everybody, most people here know. They know that after 18 months, more than 18 months of speaking out about the vaccine harms, I mean, they know, and they don't like it. They're just trying to desperately hang on till the general election, the line that they're safe and effective. Because, unfortunately, the way the party system works, all the MPs here have all put out hundreds, if not thousands, of letters to their constituents reassuring them that they're safe and effective. And obviously there's a lot of political capital been invested in that. And were you to find that your elected member of parliament, whatever party they might pretend to represent, had been putting out and advising you that it's perfectly reasonable to take your children and get them vaccinated, your grandparents, whatever, get them boosted. If that was going to turn out to be spurious advice, then people mightn't be very happy, might they?
That's right.
So you can see there's a clear political expediency to keep a lid on this until after the general election. I don't think they can. I think we've actually passed the tipping point now with regard to the vaccine harms and excess deaths. Sadly, because just too many people know people who've been taken early.
That's right.
And, it's just so sad that... And of course, the longer the House of Commons goes on before we acknowledge the problem, the longer it is before we can start putting in place any way to help those who've been afflicted. And I took 2 doses and they hurt me. And lots of my friends who won't appear on the yellow card system, I can assure you. It's very, very frustrating. And that is, half of what the Conservative Party the government have done to me as punishment for speaking out on the vaccine wasn't for me. It's actually to keep the others in line, and it's worked. I mean, I've had the reason I really spoke out when I did was because the government was being pressured by the Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency to authorise the vaccines for under 5s. And I knew I could win on that, even if it cost me my career. I could get something for that, which was I'd managed to stop the government from doing it. They wouldn't dare do it. Because even the most pro-vaccine of person, I could persuade them that there's never been a healthy child of that age that's died of COVID. So the risk was minuscule, but there is some risk anyone would have to perceive there is some risk from the vaccines. And, they didn't. They weren't able to. We're one of the few countries that didn't vaccinate down to 6-month-old babies. So that's good. And also when I spoke out on March the 17th, I think it was, 2023, on the number needed to vaccinate and the efficacy and safety of the booster programme, which they were starting the spring booster then. The government again said I was talking rubbish and it was all conspiracy theories, but within 3 weeks they'd upped the minimum age to 75 from a universal booster. So that would have done some good. And also the immunocompromised were getting it. I mean, they are quite honestly that ill people, no one should be having these experimental vaccines, but those immunocompromised, when the vaccines actually destroy your immune system, it's criminal.
Well, of course, the AstraZeneca vaccines have now been pulled worldwide. You're stepping step.
No, but I mean, we had all this last Thursday with bad Penny. I mean, Penny Mordaunt, Leader of the House, sorry. So I call that my Penny Dreadful question on a Thursday to the Leader of the House. Yeah, she called me said it was only because of commercial reasons. They weren't selling very many. And she called me a conspiracy theorist twice. I mean, they're still doubling down. I mean, she is very good friends with Bill Gates. He did write the foreword to her book. She has lots of lovely pictures with the vaccine.
Let's touch on that excess deaths debate. I was in the House that day from the gallery. Crazy experience just being there, watching from there. But before we even got to that debate, there was a lot of challenges along the way. It wasn't the case of just, we need to talk about this, let's do this.
Oh, well, the first debate in the world, I think, was my debate last October, which is only a half-hour adjournment debate at the end of the day, and they gave, I think it was a Thursday night. But I mean, I'd applied 26 times to get that debate and been refused.
Well, this is after, during COVID, no one was safe until we're all safe, and now yet we're seeing these excess deaths numbers, which does affect large portions of the population.
And around the world.
And
it's very closely correlated with the level of COVID-19 vaccination. And also all the deaths, really. I mean, we're pretty much getting out now that around the world there really wasn't any excess deaths in 2020. It was just a normal respiratory virus, normal flu year, really, because we didn't have any flu that year. We only had coronavirus. And we didn't have as many cases of that as we probably average of the number of flu cases we have on a normal year. So no excess deaths around the world really in 2020. We start rolling out the vaccines in 2021 and suddenly we do have excess deaths.
What's the next steps from that debate where you actually made all those points now on record? And it's also the beauty of the digital age we live in now. You point around the other MPs. Well, we've got all the proof of their position.
Well, that speech was, I don't know, 20-odd million times it's been viewed on social media around the world. So even though it's not reported in the national legacy press in the UK, as they never are, but I can guarantee you one thing, if I got some of the facts provably wrong, they would have noted it. That's why when I prepare those speeches, I send them to scientists and doctors who I trust to check everything out to make sure we can. And we always produce a press pack to go with it that verifies all the papers, and that's why the legacy media never talk about it, because they can't rubbish it and they can't talk about it, can't endorse it, so therefore just ignore it. That's the best I can do, but it does tend to go around the world a few times on social media. And I mean, if you'd have said the world would be in the state it is, and I would be in the situation I am 5 years ago to me, I think I probably would have said you were a conspiracy theorist. But as someone of sort of right of centre views, I think we have to live in the world as it is, not like we'd like it to be. We can only work towards making the world how we'd like it to be. And our democracy, the way of life, the Great Reset, Agenda 2030, is such a threat to the quality of life to most people on this planet. We're going to have to stand up and we're going to have to fight for our rights. Otherwise, humanity is going down. And there's nowhere to run. It's happening all over the globe at the same time. You might be able to buy yourself a few more years in Africa if there's any food, which there probably won't be. So yeah, it's coming fast. It's coming fast.
I want to quote you from you spoke at the European Parliament about the WHO document. You said the very concept of democracy is under threat as it's never been before. And you went on to say that the threat is coming from corruption and decay of our own institutions.
Yep.
Could you, people used to say that the WHO, the UN were noble institutions, and many people still believe that to be the case. In your mind, could you give us an assessment?
Isn't it interesting that all these noble institutions based in Geneva, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, which is an offshoot of the UN, Gavi, CEPI, Bank of International Settlement, they've all got diplomatic immunity. Why do all these organisations that are supposedly doing great things for humanity and only good, why do they all need to be based in Geneva and have protection, diplomatic immunity from prosecution? Well, as far as the WHO is concerned, if these powers, any powers that are passed to that organisation, which is completely owned by Bill Gates and the Chinese Communist Party in some sort of unholy alliance, if the Director General has these powers and he calls a public health emergency of international concern, and you don't like it, or I don't like it, or anybody else on the planet doesn't like it, there is absolutely no court anywhere in the world that has a jurisdiction for us to challenge the decisions of the Director General of the WHO. That is pure dictatorship and autocracy. And it's the absolute antithesis of any representative parliamentary democracy that people have signed up to and think they're going to get, and think they have a right to. I mean, these are dangerous times. And it isn't even about us. Things are very dark for the next generations if we don't make a stand. And honestly, we've got a debt to them. They got hammered during COVID. The children took the brunt of it, and that's appalling because no humane society sacrifices children to protect adults. That's not how it's going to work. And we're now in a situation where if we don't sort this out, and it's happened on our watch, we're responsible. We've let it happen. We've got to put it right. It's going to be a very dark future for our children and grandchildren.
You're joining us in Geneva to send a clear message. What's your message to people at home, and should they be joining us in Geneva? We're inviting people from all over Europe. There's a convoy coming to join us there.
There's a lot of protests around the UK as well, I think, on the 1st of June. I think you've got to be aware of huge issues, challenges, threats to your freedoms and your way of life, threats that you never expected ever to be facing, coming from places where you would expect your best interests to have been protected. And I don't think anyone's coming to save us. We've got to save ourselves, and people are waking up. But they better wake up fast, because we haven't got long now.
Indeed. You're invited to join us in Geneva. Road to Geneva.com. We'll see you there. Andrew, I want to finish up by just, when we met recently in London, you spoke about your new office, the office with no light. Could you tell us what happened? You moved across the wings of Parliament to this...
About as far away from the chamber as you can be. And bear in mind, when the bell goes off for a division, a vote, I've only got 8 minutes to get to the chamber, else I can't vote. So it's inconvenient. The heating's a bit in and out. There's no natural light. All the computers, we've had problems with the emails. I mean, everything. The printer's gone wrong now. The IT here is very... Since we've moved to this office and I've been speaking out inexplicably, we have problems with everything. There's a door there to another office. Also, this is the smallest office on this corridor, yet I'm the most long-serving MP on this corridor. If you want to play, it's another message. If you don't play the game, we just make things very, very uncomfortable for you. It's petty. And I think it shows how desperate they are. And also, I think that it's actually, I feel sorry for my staff who have to work in these conditions, because it's not fair on them. You know, they haven't done anything wrong other than work for me. But we're looking after the national interest, and they're not going to grind us down.
Mm.
And those are, I hope you'll take some pictures of those. Those are mine. You can, normally your artwork in an office, you just take it from the Parliament stock. Well, everything here is mine. So I actually bought those before I was an MP on the idea they would sit in my office. Well, they've been sitting in my office for 14 years, and I hope you'll agree, they've never been more relevant.
Will you read it for the audience at home?
Well, one of them says that freedom is in peril, defend it with all your might. And the other one says your courage, your cheerfulness, your resolution will bring us victory.
Well, that might I'll answer my final question, which is, despite all of these challenges, what is the fire that keeps you going? What is it that motivates you every day despite those challenges? And even people on our side who are quick to throw rocks, against those, or the critic, what keeps you going?
Well, the fact is that I know I'm standing on the truth and I will be vindicated. It's only a matter of when. And I would, obviously, for lots of reasons, it's better sooner than later. And the second is the public support. Thousands of emails every week of support. When I walk in the streets, whether it's in London, northwest Leicestershire or anywhere else in the country, people come up to me and thank me. And even in Parliament, where it appears that I'm isolated, I eat on my own, I speak in the chamber on my own, I don't have much to do with the other MPs at all. But they're a minority because there's about 4,000 real people who work in Parliament, the cooks and the cleaners, the waiters, the security guards, the police, the clerks. I can tell you 80% of those are with me. And when I walk out of this office and go out at night, when there's no one on the corridor, one of the cleaners will come and put her arm around me and whisper, "Me, Andrew, we're all praying for you."
And it's those people...
You can't let those people down.
No, and it's those people that represent the British public. And
yes.
And it's my hope that time will tell and the public will do what is right by people like yourself and the other leaders who have had the courage to stand up.
Well, if we don't, then it's over anyway, so what will it all matter?
Andrew,
and then they said to me, the last thing that before I was cancelled, the BBC said to me is, "Why are you sacrificing your career on the hill of vaccine harms?" And I said, "Because that's the hill you're killing my people on."
Andrew, I commend everything that you're doing. Thank you for being with us here today in your office, and thank you for having us here in Parliament. It's beautiful to be here with you. And every testament, we look forward to sharing the stage together in Geneva. And it's our hope that many people will travel across Europe to join us. It's important that we take a stand. The question is, what won't you do for your freedom? We can't place all the burden on your shoulders. We must all rise together in this. This is a shared journey. This is a shared challenge. We all have a role to play. It's easy for people to say, well, Andrew's doing this and Dan's doing that. We must work together. This is a time for people to come together. What's your last message to people at home? What can they do right now to support you and to support the cause?
Well, they've got to lobby their elected representatives at all levels and be aware that they've got to be aware that what we're seeing in our democracy, it has been usurped. The party system is now corrupted, and we need to get to direct democracy as soon as possible. Demos democracy is from the Greek. Demos is the people, and kratos is the power. How powerful do the people really feel? I don't think they feel very powerful. I think they're scared of what government's going to do to them next. It's not just in this country. I'm speaking to Australians, to Canadians, to Americans. It's exactly the same. It's all over Europe as well. So we need to put the people back in control. If I had my way, and I think it's a system we'll have to bring in, we'll have to move to the Swiss model. We'll get rid of the House of Lords completely, halve the number of MPs, no external interests, and all legislation on quarterly referendums and debates with the people. And then the people will be the government to own. Because when we've won this, I don't want to be in a position that in my dotage, anyone would ever, or when I'm lying on my deathbed thinking that this is going to be done to the people again, because it can never be done again. We need to lay the foundations to make sure it can't. And putting the people back in charge of their own futures is the best way.
I completely agree with you. The challenge I have with this now is, in the world where the media is so controlled and captured, democracy requires information, requires full information, requires people to be informed to make choices, informed consent over their choices. Yet the tyranny of the majority is also a very real risk. During COVID, people were literally grappling at the door to shut us down because of the information they were being given.
Legacy media they're finished. They're finished that's why they're so committed to the narrative, because they're going down with the corrupt politicians and the corrupt businesses who've done this to the people. They're finished at the same time. We're going to have a new sort of media. We're going to have a new sort of politics. We're going to have and build a new society, something better than we had before.
Absolutely. Andrew Bridgen, thank you so much for being here with us on the Free Humanity Podcast. Keep up the great work, and we'll see you in Geneva.
See you in Geneva.
Say no to the WHO. You're invited to join us on the Road to Geneva, our exciting new campaign to resist the World Health Organization. The Road to Geneva campaign will culminate in a pan-European convoy that's going to converge outside the city of Geneva on Friday, the 31st of May, ahead of a peaceful rally outside the United Nations building on Saturday, the 1st of June. If you want to join us, head over to roadtogeneva.com and you'll find about the latest convoy plans, how to get involved, and details of the wider campaign to challenge the WHO. I hope we'll see you on the Road to Geneva.